The thoughts and opinions of Skylar Sylvie expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of the Grimm Times podcast or Jeff Jarman. Thank you and enjoy the show.
All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast. This is episode number 2. I am your host, Jeff Jarman of the Jeff Jarman Show, also of the Jeff Jarman Show, and several other projects. My co-host, Skylar Sylvie.
I like chicken.
If you watched the first or second episode of the Jeff Jarman Show, you would know that Skylar likes. Yeah, you would know that Skylar likes chicken. On this episode, we're going to talk about something a little scarier. This is the black-eyed children. This phenomena has been picking up, especially since the 1980s. It's been recorded throughout history, but more rarely, really. But just to give a brief overview here, the black-eyed children phenomena has been always, well, not always, but almost always happening in people's homes and or at people's homes. Usually, just to give a brief overview, whoever it is, the family, usually it's a single couple, I guess. But they'll be at home and everything, and they'll hear a knock on the door, and they'll go to check it out, and usually it'll be 1, 2, maybe 3 kids at most. And they'll be at the doorstep, and you open the door, and usually they have their heads down, so you can't really see their eyes at first. And the first thing that most people notice is their clothing. They'll have very plain clothing on, like brownish clothes, sometimes black, I guess. Usually, you don't see a cell phone, you don't see any sort of electronic like a normal kid would have. So that's one oddity that really stands out. You could almost say their clothing is Amish-like in that, in that sense of plainness. But they're always facing down, and then when they do look up, finally, people notice immediately their black eyes. And we're talking not just the pupil being black, but the entire eye. There's no white. It's all just black. And for some reason, people just get this immense feeling of fear. It's not just the sight. It's like an emotion. It comes off of the children or something like that. But, and they always ask, can we come in? They always need to be invited in to the home. And usually they'll want to use the phone, or they'll want to, just come in, and they'll say, it'll only be a minute. And they'll say really weird things, like they'll say things that normal people wouldn't say, like, is it food time? We wouldn't really say that. We would say, is it dinner time? Is it time to eat? No, they say, is it food time? So this adds to the speculation of whether they could be extraterrestrial, because, they wouldn't understand our language perfectly, maybe.
They could be transsexual.
Or they could be demonic in nature. It's so hard because sometimes it seems like they feed off of people's fear, and that's what they're there for.
I have a perfectly logical explanation.
Okay.
Yeah. What it is, it's a bunch of Amish children that listen to too much of the Black Eyed Peas, misinterpreted the meaning of the band name, if there is one, and they just got some contacts on the internet of somebody else's house that they bothered and put them on their eyes, and their eyes are black, and they're going around bothering people because they paid attention to too many vampire movies that required the vampires, of course, have to ask permission to go in. Once you let them in, then, you get your blood sucked out, but
yeah.
Then they eat your feces.
There is the contacts thing. You can get contacts that will black out your entire eye. The problem is you would be almost virtually blind with these contacts in.
That's why they have their heads down. Okay, seriously, let's think about it. Why would an alien come 50 billion light years, assumingly, all the way down to knock on somebody's doorstep and ask for food and a cell phone?
Well, the only reason I would say it's extraterrestrial, or it could be, is because the eyes, with them being black like that, it's almost like they could be a hybrid between human and alien. Because, with the grays, their eyes, the way they're shaped, and usually they're described as being almost all black, that's just one possibility. And they're also usually very pale-skinned children. And I don't know if I said the ages, usually between 7 years old and 14, somewhere in that age category. They don't usually come older than that or younger than that. Some people have seen black-eyed adults, but it's much more rare. mean, we'll get into a couple.
Yeah, it's because you know why?
Why is that?
Because after a certain age, people quit listening to Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah, they grow out of it. Yeah. No, we'll get into a couple stories of these encounters a little bit later on. But just to keep giving the brief overview, I guess it's not brief anymore. But yeah, they always ask to come in. I mean, it's happened in vehicles too. That's another thing that could happen. But I mean, and the interesting thing is, for anybody listening to this, sometimes after you talk about this sort of thing, it can almost manifest it. So I mean, David Weatherly is one of the top researchers in this field, and he put out a book called The Black Eyed Children. You can get it on his website. I still need to pick that book up. I've listened to him lecture on several occasions, and it's really fascinating, but I need to get the book. But some people have said after reading the book, they've actually had some sort of experience with this kind of thing, like the telephone would ring, and then there would be no one there, or just random little things like that. I mean,
that's called self-fulfilled prophecy / hallucination, schizophrenia.
Basically where the human mind kind of expects it, and so it kind of manifests itself somehow. I don't know. We can just jump into one of the stories right now. I mean, and we're talking about grown men being scared of these children, and that's fairly unusual. I mean,
because they're
obviously.
pussies.
Well, okay, here's one story. There was this guy at home. He was home alone. He lived, just him, and he had I think it was a bulldog. I'm not totally sure. But it was definitely kind of the guard dog of the house, I guess.
The man?
Yeah, the man had a pet bulldog.
Oh, I thought you said he was the bulldog.
No. And so this bulldog was like the guard dog, and it wasn't scared of anything. I mean, it was pretty much fearless. And one night, he was home alone, and he got a knock on the door, and he opened the door, and it was a young boy, probably about 9 years old, I would say. And as soon as the doorbell rang, the bulldog, was in the back room, and it just sprang into action, headed toward the door, like it normally would. And as soon as it got right up to the rim of the door, and the entryway was a tile entryway, and so when this dog got close, he just tried to stop dead in his tracks. I mean, he was stumbling over himself on the tile, and he turned around and ran all the way back into the house, and he hid until that kid was gone. And almost nobody ever lets the children in. That's another pretty common question. Nobody ever lets the kids in. I mean, there have been a couple rare occurrences when they did, and we'll get into one of those stories later. But this bulldog ran all the way back to the other side of the house, and he said that dog was never the same again. I mean, it scared the living daylights out of that dog, and it was never a guard dog again. I mean, it was super timid, and it still is to this day, as far as I know. But that just shows you there's something supernatural about these children. I mean, to where you can affect an animal like that. Because, I mean, people often say that, animals, dogs, or cats, they can sense this kind of thing.
Right. Why didn't you whip out a Polaroid?
That's another good question. I mean, a lot of people, they don't really have their camera laying around, and especially when somebody comes up to the door, I mean, they can't just be like, "Hey kid, wait right here, I'll be right back with my camera."
Do you know what I would do?
What's that?
I let the kid in and like, "Yeah, is it dinner time? Yeah, here's some vodka."
Well, see, that's risky. Even if it was a kid, you can't really just...
Well, let's think about the worst case scenario, okay? Let's say it wasn't a prank, and it was some real, I don't know, some guy back in the day got abducted by aliens, had sex with one, and just came back down and knocked on a door. Okay?
Some people do think that it could be a long-lost child of theirs.
With black eyes, yeah. Anyway, the point is that that's some fucked up children. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Let the kid in with, black eyes, black-eyed pea kid. Anyway, you let him in, give him some vodka. Worst case scenario, the kid passes out drunk after a point. Then you take a picture and, call the military.
Yeah, that could be a good idea or a very bad idea, depending on...
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call the military, just the press.
Yeah. That's another thing, though, going back to the camera deal. Even if you did take a picture, it's so easy nowadays to Photoshop something like
Now with
that.
the Polaroid,
Well, yeah, but how many people you know have Polaroids laying around?
me, I still have a VHS tape player.
Yeah, I might have the VHS somewhere, but I definitely don't have one of those cameras anymore. But yeah, it's just one of those deals. I mean,
And actually, the police and stuff use Polaroids because in court, if you have a Polaroid picture, you can't really argue with it. It's like
yeah,
you can't digitally render, one of those.
yeah,
You have to manipulate everything else around it. So the argument could be, oh, well, you just got some kid painted his eyelids black and had him shut his eyes. And then put a black-eyed pea shirt on him.
Well, I mean, even if it was the eyelids, I think you could tell if you were up close, and plus the kid would be like bouncing into walls and stuff if he was trying to walk. But a lot of times, like I said, they want to use the phone or they want to come in and it'll just be a minute and that kind of thing. I mean, some alien abduction people, they think that they've been abducted, and they think that this kid might be their child. There's only been a couple cases of that actually happening that I've heard of. But yeah, it's hard to say.
I certainly want to listen to the song Moonchild from Iron Maiden.
Little plug for Iron Maiden there. But, yeah, so let's get to that other story really quick. We're about halfway through the podcast right now, so this one happened in a car, actually. And so what the deal was, this mother, she had her son with her in the back seat, and she was driving and the son was in the back seat. And they went to the supermarket. She had to just run in real quick and get a couple things, and so she left him in the car, and she went in the store real quick, and then she got her stuff. She came back out to the car, and she just jumped in kind of on autopilot, and she looked up in the rearview mirror, and there was a little boy sitting next to her son in the back seat. And the first thing she noticed staring back at her were these jet black eyes. And immediately she was more scared than she'd ever been in her whole life. And she got out of the car, ran around to the side, snatched her son out of the car, and she asked him, like, why did you let this kid get in the car with you? And he said, well, Mommy, the boy wanted to come in and play. He wanted to come, so we were going to go back to my house and we were going to play. And so he gave the boy permission to get in the minivan with him. And so yeah, that's what happened there. And
there's a flaw of this whole story.
What's that?
No woman goes to the store real quick. It doesn't happen. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go get a gallon of milk. Okay. And then she comes out with a full minivan full of freaking like milk and soda and beer and chips and you name it, like the whole freaking back end full. She comes out of the store with a fucking cart full of shit after saying she's going in to get a gallon of milk. There's no like, I'm gonna go to the store real quick.
That is true. That's true in most cases, but this one was the exception, I guess. But,
yeah, right. The one woman on Earth who went completely out of her way with her kid to get to the store real quick.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, why would you take the kid if it was real quick? Just leave him at home.
Yeah, maybe they were on the way home from school or something, I don't know. But to follow up with this story, after this happened, the boy was gone, by the way. They looked back into the car, or it was a minivan, but they looked back in the minivan, and the boy was just gone. And so she refused to drive home after that. She did not want to get back in the car, so she actually called and had her husband come pick them up, and she drove his vehicle home, and he drove the minivan home. And after that...
he said she was full of shit and they got divorced, yeah.
Well, I don't think he believed her at first, but he could see how upset she was. And so what happened was, after that, just a couple months actually, I think, the boy got really sick, their son. And it started out as like flu-like symptoms, and the doctors treated it, and then it turned into something else. And they treated that, and this kept going for a full year. He was just sick all year. It kept morphing into different symptoms, and they couldn't ever figure out what was wrong with him. But now I think he's a teenager, and he's healthy. But yeah, for a full year there, after this experience with the kid, with the black-eyed child, he was sick for a really long time. So it could be, it could be related. I don't know if these children are like a harbinger of, plague, or not really plague, but, like sickness or that kind of thing, or if maybe they're an omen that something bad is going to happen. I mean,
or maybe if you let them in for too long, their mouths open real wide and they bite your head off.
yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap this podcast up. The next podcast will most likely be discussing drones and what the government is doing with those things, and basically all the information we know about them right now. And then in the future, I plan on having several more shows about the demonic and paranormal area of things. So we'll see where it goes. And then we're also going to have an episode of just ghost stories, just a full 20 minutes of just different stories. And
then unexplained mysteries like the Loch Ness penis.
Or the Loch Ness Monster. Did you know that Charlie Sheen just took an expedition up there trying to find the Loch Ness Monster?
Yeah, he also took an expedition to the inside of his asshole and said he had tiger blood. So, whatever.
Wait, was that a real thing?
Well, not the crawling up the inside of his ass part, but the tiger blood part was.
Oh, wow.
He went on this rant after he was on the internet about, he was going on about he got fired or said something about Chuck Lorre when he was with 2.5 midget men, and he went on this rant saying, "I have tiger blood." Blah blah blah. Huh. I'm not kidding. He went on a big narcissistic ego rant.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a big fan of Chuck Lorre or whatever his name is either. I mean, he did 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah, and House.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he seems like a self-righteous prick to me, but...
Well, that's fine, but House and the Big Bang Theory is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, not saying he can't do a good show, that's for sure, but I don't know. So, alright, well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up here.
Yeah, it's like we're just on a side note, okay? Charlie Sheen calling Chuck Lorre a narcissist and blah, 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 like he did, is like the pot calling the kettle of black-eyed pea.
Alright, well, I'm Jeff Jarman, that is Skylar Sylvie, and we will catch you next time on the Grimm Times podcast.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this right now, go away, you're bothering me.